Okay, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Marjorie Shalita, and I'm doing a presentation today based on the work of Manly P. Hall, known as The Secret Teachings of All Ages. And just so everyone knows, this is my first time doing a presentation of any kind, and I was hoping to have slides, and I tried to do it, but couldn't quite figure it out. So there will be no slides, but I'll just be presenting and sharing what I can from my heart to you all. And I'm just following some notes that I have here. So I'm excited and a little tender stepping into this new role of presenter. I see this not so much as a lecture at all, but as a shared inquiry. The question guiding us today is, can the esoteric wisdom preserved by Manly P. Hall in The Secret Teachings of All Ages offer something meaningful in our present time of uncertainty and transformation? So why should we look back to move forward? Manly P. Hall published The Secret Teachings nearly 100 years ago, and we're living now through unprecedented breakdowns in our systems. How might the ancient symbolic teachings inform a present-day integral view? In times like these, there is both danger and opportunity. Systems are unraveling, certainty is ending, and yet perhaps this is a fertile time to revisit some of the deeper symbolic frameworks humanity has long carried, not to regress, but to remember and reimagine. Or as Jean Houston says, don't pathologize, re-mythologize. And first, before we kind of got into Manly P. Hall and his biography and his work, I want to kind of share with you a little bit of my own spiritual path and how I came to spiral dynamics and how I came to appreciate Manly P. Hall's work. So from my childhood, I was raised Lutheran. And then from there to young adulthood, I became involved in the 12-step philosophy, specifically Al-Anon and adult children of alcoholics. In my middle years, I was involved very much in New Thought, particularly science of mind. And then later on, I got involved in earth-based spirituality, or neo-paganism, as some people call it, modern witchcraft, and Hermeticism. And then I was introduced probably back around 2012 to spiral dynamics and integral theory. I took a course with my friend, Dr. Jim Lockhart, who is a retired science of mind minister now. And he was, at that time, he was giving a course in Introduction to Spiral Dynamics. And that's how I was first introduced. And then I took several courses with Ken Wilber and his work. And in present day time, I'm still very much involved in the New Thought movement, Science of Mind, or Centers for Spiritual Living, as it's known. And then also I'm involved with an intentional community called A New Republic of the Heart, based on Terry Patton's work. He wrote a book by that same title, A New Republic of the Heart. Back in 2019, there was a year-long intentional community that he led. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Terry Patton. He was very involved with Ken Wilber's work in the integral world, and he left us. He passed away in 2021 at the age of 70. So we lost another one of our leaders at that point. So I'm very much involved still with all of these things, but with each of these things that I've been involved with through my lifetime, each one of them had their own particular, what I would call sacred agreements or statements of belief, what they believed in, or their own principles that they lived by, or you would even might even say a mission statement. And so I'm thinking that that's where we want to kind of go today, is how can we kind of get from the past into the present and into the future? How would we want to update some of these ancient or older belief system, which I guess from spiral dynamics would be considered from the blue traditional, or even orange. but we'll get to that in a moment. So let's go back to Manly P. Hall. Who was Manly P. Hall? Let's see, I have a particular little biography that I wanted to read to you or share with you. I won't get into too much of it, but just a little bit here. Apologies for trying to find it. Okay, here we go. Manly P. Hall was born in 1901 and died in 1990. He was born in Canada. He was a scholar, a writer, a lecturer, best known for his work on philosophy, comparative religion, mysticism, and the occult. He founded the Philosophical Research Society in Los Angeles, an organization dedicated to the dissemination of knowledge in these fields. Another writer whom I follow, his name is Mitch Horowitz. He's a writer and historian. He has curated the collections of Hall's works, particularly focusing on his writings about America's hidden history and destiny. A little bit more of a detail about Manly P. Hall. He was raised in the American West by his grandmother, and he had limited formal schooling. He's most famously known for the work of The Secret Teachings of All Ages. He gained widespread recognition for this that he wrote in 1928 at the age of, I believe he was 27 years old when he wrote this massive work. He established the Philosophical Research Society in 1934 to promote the study of wisdom, literature, and the philosophical systems. He delivered over 8,000 lectures and authored over 150 books and essays, many of which have been transcribed and made available. You can follow him on YouTube. Most of his works have been preserved on YouTube. Mitch Horowitz, his role was as a respected figure in the study of esoterica, has highlighted Hall's work, particularly in writing on America's unique purpose and the hidden history. Hall's view of America, he believed that America had a special destiny rooted in principles of personal freedom, self-governance, and independent thought. His impact and legacy, his work continues to influence scholars, researchers, and those interested in the occult, mysticism, and comparative religion. And so let's go back now to how I would like to be able to share a little bit with you each of the spiritual paths that I took along my path throughout my lifetime. Going back to my childhood religion of Lutheran, Martin Luther, as we all know, particularly, sorry about that. Let me see if I can mute my phone. My apologies. Okay. So Martin Luther famously helped usher in the Renaissance period of history in the 1500s. And he famously put his 95 Theses up on the door of the Catholic Church in protest. He was quite the revolutionary of his time. And so just a couple of the things that he focused on as a statement of belief or as a philosophy that has carried up through time and history into the present. He was opposed to the indulgences of the Catholic Church at that time. Oh my goodness, sorry. Thought I had muted that. Okay. Hopefully that won't happen again. So anyway, Martin Luther was very, very much interested in putting emphasis on faith, not works. He highlighted the belief that salvation is a gift from God that received through faith rather than something that could be earned through good deeds or financial contributions. At that time, the Catholic Church was quite corrupt during those years, leading out of the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance period. He was an authority on the Bible. He emphasized repentance versus penance. He was a critique of the power that the papacy held. He distinguished true spiritual repentance and the outward performance of penance, suggesting that indulgences discourage genuine remorse for sins. He focused on the poor. His thesis criticized the emphasis on financial contributions for indulgences, arguing that it diverted resources from helping the poor and performing acts of charity. So that was my first experience being exposed to the blue traditional profession of beliefs in my young childhood. And then from there, I went to the 12-step movement, and as we all know, the 12 steps have their own philosophy and certain, especially in relevance to the Al-Anon, which is an organization that supports the family members of the addict or the person that's in question. And especially in regards to codependency, which was my path. My father was an alcoholic, and my mother was the enabler, and I was the middle child of 3. And then my younger brother was born when I was 15. And so I took the role of the peacekeeper in the family, and not make any waves, be a good student, do the right thing, and try to be invisible. And that was my role in the family as an alcoholic. And therefore, it was conducive to codependency. And I began to realize that as I graduated college, got married, had children, and wasn't long after that I began to see that my life was playing out some of the dysfunctional aspects of my childhood. So I sought help through the 12-step movement. And in particular, those 12 principles emphasize honesty, hope, faith, courage, integrity, willingness, humility, love, as in brotherly and sisterly love, discipline, justice, perseverance, spiritual awareness, and service. So that's another system that I was involved in, and very, very much helped me in my life as I matured and grew into being able to step into a more mature role, eventually, hopefully entering second tier. In my middle years, I found the New Thought movement, particularly science of mind. And the science of mind has its own set of principles. And those are focused on what Ernest Holmes presented in the early 1920s. And those emphasized his declaration of principles, also known as what we believe. And I can share with you a little bit of that. And then later on, I have taken it upon myself to kind of update those for myself. I'm not sure that the movement, the New Thought movement itself, is ready to be updated. It desperately needs it, as that movement is also a system that is in decline as far as the numbers of people, and the message it needs to be updated to take into consideration everything that we've learned in the new science, particularly quantum physics and so forth. But these are the principles as stated by Ernest Holmes in the 1920s. We believe in God, the living Spirit Almighty. We believe in the individuation of the Spirit in us, and that all people are individualizations of the one Spirit. We believe in the eternality, the immortality, and the continuity of the individual soul, forever and ever expanding. We believe that heaven is a state of consciousness, and that it is within us, and that we experience it to the degree that we become conscious of it. We believe in the ultimate goal of life to be a complete freedom from all discord of every nature, and that this goal is sure to be attained by all. We believe in the unity of all life, and that the highest God and the innermost God is one God. We believe in the direct revelation of truth. We believe that universal spirit, which is God, operates through a universal mind, which is the law of God. and that we are surrounded by this creative mind, which receives the direct impress of our thought and acts upon it. We believe in the healing of the sick and the control of conditions through the power of this mind. We believe in the eternal goodness, the eternal loving kindness, and the eternal givingness of life to all. We believe in our own soul, our own spirit, and our own destiny, for we understand that the life of all is God. And those are stated quite emphatically, quite with very much power and conviction and belief in what he states. It does not leave a lot of room there for randomness, for how human beings are human and therefore full of frailties and the potential for harm. So this is why I felt like that statement needed to be updated, which I will share with you in a little bit. Let's see, we want to go now to the, after that, I was exposed to the earth-based spirituality. And I can share with you, let's see. This one, because I became involved in here locally in Greenville, North Carolina, something called modern witchcraft or neo-paganism. And so the principle from that particular tradition is called the Wiccan Rede. And it says, by the Wiccan law ye must, in perfect love and perfect trust, 8 words the Wiccan Rede fulfill, and ye harm none, do what ye will. What ye send forth comes back to thee, so ever mind the law of 3. Follow this with mind and heart, merry meet and merry part. So that's another one of my sort of blue, from the spiral dynamics perspective, traditional perspectives that has been important in my lifetime. And then from there, we went on to the spiral dynamics and integral theory. And that particular spiral dynamics has this sort of a principle, belief system, which otherwise known as, where is it? Let's see, I had it here. Okay, these are the 12 Gravesian principles, which I'm pretty sure all of you are familiar with since we're all spiral dynamic wizards here. So the 12 Gravesian principles from Claire Graves. Number 1, human development is an emergent, oscillating process that subordinates older, less complex ways of thinking or being to newer, more expansive, more complex ones. Older systems do not disappear, but are subsumed within the more elaborate ones and can be reactivated when older problems surface. This means that life is evolving toward greater complexity at both the individual and species levels. You retain the energies that you pass through as you develop greater capacities for complexity. Number 2, people tend to change their biopsychosocial beings as their conditions of existence change. This means that you continually recreate yourself as you develop the neural structure of your brain body and your psychological makeup. Value systems alternate between a focus on the external world, how to change and control it, and the internal world, how to come to peace with it. The levels alternate between individual and communal worldviews, between express self and sacrifice self. Number 4, value systems arise from the interaction of 2 sets of forces, existential problems of a living milieu, neuropsychological equipment in the brain. As living conditions change, your system is designed to adapt both physically and mentally. Number 5, people centralized in a value system are psychosocially congruent with components of that system. This means that when you have everyone at the same V-meme, they tend to see the world from the same level of complexity. They may disagree, but they understand each other pretty well. Number 6, a person may not be equipped to move to more complex systems, even if the conditions of existence demand it. Sometimes one lacks the necessary capacities for greater development due to injury or some other defect. Number 7, a person may stabilize at one or a combination of value system if the conditions of existence are stable. This means that when the living conditions become stable, people in those situations tend to become stable at a V mean. Number 8, within each value system is a range of positive and negative characteristics and behaviors, adaptive and maladaptive elements. This means that V memes work well for the living conditions to which they are suited, but as things begin to change, they may actually create problems. This is the sign that the V meme needs to change. Number 9, when problems and conditions warrant, a person or a group may regress to a previous value system. This means if living conditions regress, greater complexity may be a liability. So people may adapt to lower V memes. Number 10, a person may function in either open, arrested, or closed states in different areas. This means that the range of willingness to see other points of view within a V meme and speaks to the ability to change easily. Excuse me. Number 11, intelligence, gender, race, and age do not correlate with value systems, although they can impact one's conditions. The research shows that none of these is a significant factor in your ability to adapt to new living conditions. And lastly, number 12, no value system is inherently better or worse than another. Appropriateness to the milieu and conditions of existence are key. It is not better to have the capacity for more complexity if you are living in very simple living conditions. If there is a better, it is that it is better to be able to adapt across the spiral as the situation demands. So those is another set of beliefs that I have chosen to kind of take into myself and try to live my life according to a certain set of beliefs. And then again, like I said, I belong to the intentional community, A New Republic of the Heart. And that was founded by Terry Patton. And he was quite a special being. I really grew to know him. I never met him in person. I was all online. But his work was phenomenal. And the community is still ongoing, even though they're struggling to try to hold it together since his passing. I think I want to go back now to Manly P. Hall's work. And actually, I can show you. This is my copy of, I don't know, that probably doesn't show up too well because I'm blurred there. Anyway, this is just the an edition of the book. The original book, and I went ahead and invested in the book that came out when he first wrote it in the 1920s, a massive book. Maybe I think it's like 26 inches long, tall, and it's like 30 pounds to pick it up. And it has just the table of contents alone is phenomenal. And it comes with its own full length posters that you can of drawings of ancient works, artwork, and so forth. So what I wanted to add up all of this, because like I said, the table of contents is massive. And what he did was before he did all the research that led up to this, he traveled and he researched, and he phenomenal individual, and that he had some sort of capacity within himself to remember, and to almost like a photographic memory, you could say. But he was able to research all of these systems and ancient texts and put it into a form that we have today. Just briefly, some of the table of contents, going from the ancient mysteries and secret societies which have influenced modern symbolism. It goes all many of the ancient systems, goes into the Atlantis and the gods of antiquity. And it talks about the zodiac and the archetypes and the astrology. Talks about Pythagoras, with the Pythagorean systems, mathematics and music. Talks about the music of the spheres from Pythagoras. He talks about the animals and the different fables and parables associated with animals and flowers and trees and stones and gems. He talks about ceremonial magic and sorcery, and it just goes on. And but what I wanted to concentrate out of all of this was his work on the Hermetic philosophy. And I can share with you a little bit about those principles. And, even though we may not recognize them as Hermetic principles, they actually have been ingrained within our modern society, and especially in particular with the American democracy. Our government was founded primarily on the Hermetic principles, and which later became the Masonic principles also. So some of those principles, then, let's see, where are we? Hmm. Okay. All right. I'll just briefly list them. There are basically 7 Hermetic principles. They're mentalism, the law of mentalism, the law of correspondence, the law of vibration, the law of polarity, the law of rhythm, the law of cause and effect, and the law of gender. Those are basically known as the Hermetic principles. And from there, I want to be able to kind of share how I've chosen to kind of try to update some of this stuff. And I did some writing. So I guess before I do that, I should probably take a little pause here, because I've done a lot of speaking, and open it up just a little bit before I continue. Are there any questions or comments before I continue?
Yeah, Marjorie, you had stated in your journey you talked about the 12 um, principles of spiral dynamics. What was that from Graves' work, or was that art?
That was from Claire Graves. I
Okay,
got this document from my friend, Dr. Jim Lockhart, who presented a introductory class on spiral dynamics. I took this course from him back in 2012 or 2013. And I mean, I have it printed out here. So it's just called the 12 Gravesian Principles.
It is in the Never-Ending Quest.
What is that? What is
the
that?
12, the 12 commandments, or I don't know how you call them. They are in the Never-Ending Quest, the Claire Graves.
Oh, okay. So I'm sorry, I'm not registering the Never-Ending Quest. Is that a book or work from Claire Graves?
Yes,
Okay.
after posthum, where they gathered all their knowledge about what Claire Graves' work, and they made this book.
It's the one that Natasha and Chris Cowan put together from all of Graves' old notes and writings.
Okay.
The stuff, he died, as you're all well aware, before he was able to finish the book he was working on.
Right. So then, even though this says it's from Claire Graves, this could have been something that what's his name?
Cowan would have put in the Never-Ending Quest.
Cowan, yeah. and or
Yeah,
even Don Beck,
do you have a,
possibly.
yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right. They would have put it there. Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else? Let me just ask a question. How many of you are familiar with Manly P. Hall or the book that I'm referring to, The Secret Teachings of All Ages? Anybody familiar with it? I
I've
guess
seen
not.
it, haven't paid a lot of attention to it,
Yeah, yeah,
but yeah, I'm aware of it.
yeah. In certain circles that I travel in, it's kind of revered. I mean, it's kind of like a cult classic or something, in certain circles. So I guess it didn't hit the spiral dynamics world or integral world in the same way.
So, so what, Marjorie, where does the occult fit in with his work? Not I understand Wicca, right?
Mhm.
And for people, we have been talking earlier about Maiden, Mother, and Crone, so I actually pasted that in for folks
Mhm.
to see what that is. But how does the occult fit into Manly's work?
Yeah, the word occult just simply means hidden. And again, that's another one of those words that's taken on a pejorative meaning in today's society, I guess you could say. So the
Well,
occult
given some of the
is
things the Nazis did with it, yeah.
yeah, right. So I mean, that's not what occult means from this perspective, at least. And so he's referring to what used to be, I guess it's still called like secret societies, like Masonic society, or whatever it's called, a Masonic philosophy is one. There are several, and his book covers all of them, many of them. But basically, those are wisdom that basically comes word of mouth, I guess, from the beginning, from antiquity all the way up through. And it's written down, but it's kind of guarded because some of these so-called secrets or principles, especially going back in time, are not at that time they were not considered appropriate for every person to know, because most of the world at that point was illiterate, and they would not appreciate the sacredness or the potential ways in which these principles or ideals or ideologies or whatever you want to call them can be used for good, but they also have the potential to be used for harm, and so they need to be protected. So a lot of the occult work, and you'll see it within indigenous cultures, you'll see it where they have, you'll have your shaman, your wise people, the leaders of the cult or the indigenous tribe or whatever, and the followers or the other tribe members are respectful of that. And in most indigenous cultures and most traditions that have some sort of hidden agenda, you could say, or a hidden belief system, they actually are respectful of, part of their belief system is that all people are equal, but that it is there are certain roles that people play in their society or in their culture, and they are protected of. So you have the leader, you have the followers, and you have some people that are teachers, or you have some that are healers, doctors, medicine men, medicine women, midwives, that sort of thing, and they have special knowledge, and they protect this knowledge, and so that's why it was sort of hidden. Of course, over time, as things opened up, then all this knowledge now is for everyone to know. Um, but again, because of the way life works and the way humanity is, everything in this 3D realm, you could say, in the world of polarity, um, has the potential for both positive and negative. And so certain things that are known to some people, if put into the wrong hands, could do harm. I don't know if that's answering your question, Barbara.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think I'm hearing you talk about two different things. The indigenous views on these would be a purple view, right? Of a benefit for my whole tribe, and some things are better left to the person who understands it, right? And we all
Right.
agree that most of us don't understand it. It seems as if when you get into the Masonic and maybe you know, the Teutonic Knights and all of those, you know, those feel more like blue manifestations, maybe even orange, and much more masculine, perhaps. You know, not and very much a feeling that rather than the indigenous view, that this was done for the benefit of the whole tribe, right?
Right.
So, sort of the more modern view of we who know better will decide what mere mortals can actually know, right? I mean, there's a very you know, it comes around the colonialism thought and all of that, where, you know, we're just better than other people, right? And I don't feel that from the tribal sense, right? From Wicca, you know, which is much more along that line. You don't feel that, but you certainly feel it from
Right.
the Western
Right.
versions of this.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. And of course, the blue would have transcended and included the purple, so that by the time you get to blue, you have already included, hopefully, the positive aspects of what needs to be included from the purple into the blue. But my practical experiences with this type of thing is what would be called modern witchcraft or neo-paganism. So it's into the modern world. So it's very much, I would say, orange into green perspective there, and then just focusing on choosing to practice those ancient traditions as a practice, you know, but doing so from a worldview that it is fully aware of the world around us, you know, that we live in the modern world or postmodern world or whatever.
Agree,
so
yeah.
So I don't really have too much more, because I kind of wanted to wrap it up here a little bit, but I did take it upon myself to create or write my own, I call it a theology of becoming. This is an emergent statement for New Thought in the 21st century. This is basically specific to New Thought, the New Thought movement, which I'm a part of, but it also relates to life in general, not just New Thought, because hopefully New Thought is relevant to all of life. So this, are we cool with this, guys? Are we okay with me sharing this? Is just a little bit more to go, and then I'll be wrapping up. Is everybody still good to go here? Okay, here we go. In the 21st century, we are called not to cling to rigid beliefs, but to live into a theology that breathes. A New Thought theology for our time must include the sacred dance of evolution and emergence, recognizing that spirit or source, God, however, whatever word you want to use to describe that which is greater than ourselves, from a perspective that there is something greater. This spirit does not merely dwell in a finished universe, but creates through each moment of becoming. Ours is a universe alive with both randomness and coherence, both mystery and pattern. The divine is not separate from the unfolding, but is intimately entangled with every breath of transformation within the cosmos and within consciousness itself. We affirm that spiritual realization is not the attainment of a finality, but the deepening of a participation in a universe of constant change. We do not seek certainty. We cultivate faith that evolves. This living theology is rooted in the foundational wisdom of New Thought, which emerged from the Hermetic philosophy of ancient Egypt, a lineage of mystical science and spiritual inquiry that teaches the correspondence of all things, the creative power of thought, and the unity of life. We honor the principle passed down through the ages, as within, so without, as above, so below. From those ancient roots grew a 20th century flowering, a rich tradition of spiritual empowerment, metaphysical healing, affirmative prayer, and the knowing that the divine lives within. There were certain pioneers of that movement: Ralph Waldo Emerson, Ernest Holmes, Charles and Merle Fillmore, and many others, that shaped a movement that reminded us that our thinking matters, our consciousness creates, and love is the deepest law. In the spirit of transcend and include, now we can widen the aperture. Today, the revelations of quantum science, which remind us that the universe is an interconnected field of possibility, not a fixed outcome. Today, we have the insights of neuroscience, showing that our minds are not merely instruments, but living interfaces of consciousness and embodiment. Today, we can look through an evolutionary lens, which reveals that the cosmos and we ourselves are always in a process of unfolding, becoming, dissolving, and reassembling. Today, we have the sacred logic of emergence, where novelty arises not from control, but from relationship, tension, and co-creation. We recognize that this God or source or spirit is not a distant architect, but the very intelligence, presence, and becoming within all things, from a subatomic spin to the human soul. Now, today, in this age of planetary crisis and evolutionary possibility, New Thought is called not toward naive optimism, but toward resilient reverence. We are invited to compost the shallow affirmations into deeper relationality, where light and shadow are both held in love. We speak not of a doctrine, but of an invitation to live with the presence of the moment, to meet the mystery with humility, to compost false certainty into a relational wisdom, to walk as future ancestors of a more whole world. We hold as sacred the meta-relational awareness that all of our insights are true but partial. This theology is a breathing spiral, not a fixed point. We honor contradiction, paradox, mystery. We see the shadow not as failure, but as compost. And we trust that what is emerging is not a replacement for the past, but a flowering through it. And so it is. And so with that, I will complete my presentation and open it up for discussion. I hope that you all have enjoyed this. Again, this was my first attempt at doing a presentation, so thank you for your patience.
Well, you did great, Marjorie. Thank you.
I wouldn't know it was a first attempt, quite frankly. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jonathan, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation, Marjorie. It gave me a lot of background to better understand when you share things in the discussions, you often will reference these things, and this has given me a lot more context to understand that.
Cool. Thank you. I'm glad, Jonathan.
So what I really appreciated about your update was that it seemed to me like you were trying to transition the formulation of the New Thought principles, which were influenced by the mechanistic concept of the universe, and with these laws that govern it, that you can manipulate basically in an orangey type of way. It seemed like you were trying to update that and move it towards a more process theology or process philosophy approach, should be more yellow. Is that how you would characterize it?
Yeah, that's the intention, but it's also with a great deal of humility, because I do have such great respect for Ernest Holmes, the founder of Science of Mind, and his wisdom. And even though he was born, again, Ernest Holmes was, these people that I'm following tended to be born like at the beginning of the 20th century and lived on to into the 90s mostly. And so their lifetimes encompassed, I guess they probably came in at orange. I'm guessing they came in at orange. I don't know how to put it in spiral dynamics, but for the most part, Ernest Holmes in particular that I'm aware of did not. He died in 1960, and so that would have been before Green would have come on board, as I understand it. And so he was definitely and very much of a I don't know. I mean, he was a very kind man, but he had his own beliefs, and he recognized plurality. He recognized all the different traditions. He studied them, the different worldviews, the different religions and psychologies and philosophies. But he came up with his own in the Science of Mind, and then from there, it seemed to me that it did sort of become a doctrine, even though he was not intended to be that. Over time, that the New Thought movement has, in my opinion, has become static, and it's suffering. It is the numbers are going down. They're struggling to maintain their systems, and but that is also true of many so-called religions and churches across the spectrum, across the world. Certainly not just here in the United States, but across, in particular, that I'm aware of in Europe. Those beautiful cathedrals now are mostly, either museums or tourist attractions, or they're for giving concerts, and they're open to the public, but they're not used for religious services for the most part. Most Europeans do not participate in a going to church on Sunday type of thing from the past. And that's been going on for decades across Europe, and it's happening here in the States. And yeah, so it's time to update. It's time to evolve. As with everything else, either you evolve or you die. Or I suppose everything dies anyway. But I mean, from that perspective, and I also believe that from my understanding of evolution, nothing ever actually dies. It becomes, grist for the mill for something to then come out of that and to evolve into the next iteration of whatever.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Barbara, go ahead.
You talked about your journey, with blue stages and on into second tier
Mm-hmm.
spirituality. And, Jordan Peterson talks a lot, and Don, I had this discussion with Don when my daughter was little, because a lot of folks with an orange base were a little worried about sending their kids to some toxic religious organizations, of which there are lots out there these days. And in both cases, the response sort of was, there's something about development at the blue stage that healthy religious groups seem to help with, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I know I have an aunt and uncle who are Mormons, and they invited me to a program that all of the Mormon adolescents in Portland do. So, I mean, we're talking about, gosh, maybe several hundreds, maybe even over 1,000 adolescents that are
Wow.
together for and basically being in a comfortable blue where they can support each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I came back home thinking about how my kids were so yuckily exposed to all of the nasty aspects of Houston society. And gosh, you know, so maybe there's something to this need for a non-toxic blue religious experience for adolescents. And it's really sad that somebody just told me yesterday that they had seen an article about the increase in Catholicism because so many of the Protestant religions no longer have that. It's just like this, and you will do it. You know, they have orange and they have green aspects to almost all of the Protestant, unless you're into the ultra right side of
fundamentalists.
Fundamentalists. But if you're and so what do you think about the need for that kind of certainty at when kids are trying to develop the blue stage, even though we know it's not so, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I don't know how to answer that basically, but I don't necessarily think that children in this time, young children now, should be raised with certainty. We're in a very uncertain world.
Yeah, we are, and we try to protect our children from that. I can remember when my daughter was in Montessori, they taught her that TV wasn't real, right? And so I happened to be watching something on the Armenian genocide, you know, which was like a century ago, and and it was some of the early moving pictures of it. And my daughter came in and she said, "Oh, wow! Thank heavens that's not real. Thank heavens it's on TV, so it's not real, right?" And I'm sitting there going, "What do you say to an elementary age child about bad things in the world?" And I finally decided, you know, honey, most of the stuff we watch on TV is just a made up story, and you should not think it's real. But sometimes we have things that we call documentaries or news that are real things that happen, and sometimes they're not very nice things because some people do bad things to other people. And you know, you just have to tell, you're right, you have to tell your kids the truth about that, because to believe otherwise, you know, Jonathan Haidt wrote the book about you know, coddling American minds, and we just try to prevent our kids from scraping a knee, you know, let alone having a emotional. And yeah, that doesn't feel right. We weren't raised that way, and I feel like we were more resilient because of it. You know, because we sometimes had those experiences.
Right. I think, you know, children do need, it needs to be age appropriate. So very, very young children need to have that definite security that mom and dad are here to protect you. You are okay. You are safe. You are well taken care of. You have food and shelter and everything that you need, and you lots of love and all of that, you know. So they do need that sense of security. So, but as they begin to get older, I don't know what age, but I mean, as soon as they get, probably age 7 or so, which is supposed to be the age of reasoning for children, around age 7 or so, where they can begin to actually, you know, reason something for themselves. And they're going to, if they're following a natural developmental stage within themselves, they're going to begin to question, you know. And so I think, you know, probably starting around that age would be appropriate for, in my opinion, it's just my personal opinion, for a family or parents to begin to acknowledge to the child, well, you're asking very important questions and I don't have the answers, but together we will figure this out, and we will, you know, we will research this, or we will look it up, or we'll ask somebody else who might know something more than I do, you know, or something. Begin to share with them your own vulnerability as a human being, you know, So I don't necessarily know that this is about the time that this theology that I'm presenting forward would come into play, when they start to get past that age, to where they're going to begin questioning themselves anyway. So you might as well go with it.
Help them learn to question.
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe this is just my personality, but it sure beats because I said so.
Yeah, right. Although there might be times when, because
Well,
that's that
oh
paradox.
yeah, because sometimes it's, you know, the answer is that kids hate. I mean, everybody hates this. The answer is when you've had more experience in the real world, you will understand this. Meanwhile, no, you can't do X because I said so, from a position of having more experience than you, right?
Right, right.
And it sounds bad in some ways, but in other ways, it's the reality of the world, right? There are things you need to protect your kids from.
Yeah. And then also, children need to be taught that there are laws that we have to follow and as part of society. You can't break the law. There are consequences for everything. And so that is that paradox between opening it up and allowing them to seek their own answers and that sort of thing. And then also following the rules of the road, But I just noticed that my friend Kimu has joined. Hello there. Yeah, there you
Yeah,
are.
good morning. I'm sorry I got the wrong time.
That's okay.
And yeah, and so I will appreciate to listen now. So
Yes, of
thank you,
course.
Marjorie, and happy birthday.
Oh, thank you, Kimu.
Yes.
You'll get the recording.
Okay, perfect.
But just
Thank
so
you.
my friends know here, you are from a group that I belong to, that we both belong to, called the Quantum Co-Creators, a small little group that we founded together back in 2014, I want to say.
Something
And
like that.
we met online in a class that we took from Gene Houston. And we started meeting online every week, once a week, and we've been meeting every week for 10 years now. And we try to do things together as a group. And some of them have met in person. Kimu is from Japan. She also lives part-time in New Mexico. And some of the others in our group live in Europe, in London, and in Denmark and Finland. Is that right? And then Argentina. Yeah. So welcome, Kimu.
Thank you. Carry on.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we're at the Q&A part, and you missed the presentation, but like I said, basically, a lot of the things that you and I have talked about as well together. And so, yeah, I don't know if you have any questions or if anybody else has any further questions. I feel like I've been doing a lot of talking, and I apologize that there were no slides again. So that might have been helpful, but it didn't happen. So.
Well, I'll wait in. I don't know if I so much have, well, a question may come out of this, but I guess the thing that I've really appreciated about you, particularly this time, is that when you've really shared your own life journey in this, which was especially interesting to me because I was able to recognize a lot of the parallels of how both of us got from there to here.
Yeah.
I was, Barbara and I have talked about this before. I was also raised in a very Christian environment, not quite as healthy as Lutheranism. And that after that phase, I kind of ended up spending a lot of time in kind of New Age philosophy, New Age teachings, which were really centered on theosophical writings. So
Mhm.
And it was interesting. There's just a massive amount of similarities in all of
Yeah.
call them esoteric, call them whatever you want.
Mhm.
That ultimately do have a very hermetic base. And then of course, after that, I really kind of was introduced to spiral dynamics, Ken Wilber's work. And since then, there's just been a lot of my own journey is centered around trying to come to a deeper understand, looking at this all from a very humanistic perspective,
Mhm.
as opposed to a more, well, Christian, which is very theocratic, and of course
Mhm.
theosophical, tries to understand it, put a little bit more of a rational spin on it. Anyway, I really appreciate I can really appreciate the journey you have been on, because I
Thank
read
you.
a lot of the same things in my own personal life journey. Gail, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Hi, Marjorie. Thank you for the
Hi,
presentation.
Gail.
I was wondering, does the book cover the Rose Cross? It's an esoteric organization, ancient, based on the Egyptian esoteric knowledge.
Rosicrucians, is that you're referring
Yes,
to?
Rosicrucian, yeah.
Rosicrucians.
Yeah, I'm not real familiar. I do know, I've heard the term and I know that that exists, but I couldn't really speak to it. But from what I understand, that's quite similar. This working with the Hermetic principles.
Yeah. But you said the book covers a lot of
Oh yeah, it would be. I'm sure it would be in here. And this is only one edition that I have, and it's a pretty hefty book in itself. But I did actually indulge myself. I found it on 50% off sale, which that never happens from the publisher. And it was, like I said, the huge book, leather bound, beautiful illustrations and artwork in it. And yeah, but it's all the same work. And actually, the author that I referred to, Mitch Horowitz, he put forward a reader's edition. It's been out for many years now, that you can get in paperback, and it's quite affordable. You can just get it on Amazon. And I think that he was able to kind of present it in such a way it was a little bit more reader friendly. I mean, this is still very, very doable, but you do have to have a lot of patience. I mean, it's dense material. I mean, I don't know if I can share, but I mean, it's just like arts, and it's not going to show up on my screen because I have the blur. Sorry about that. But anyway, I mean, you can go online, you can go on YouTube, and you can get. I've listened to the entire Audible version of it, which is like, I don't know, 30 hours or something.
and also you talked about the Republic of Our Heart and Terry Patton. You said there was
Yeah.
some YouTube videos about it, but I don't know if I have the right spelling
Yeah.
for Terry Patton.
Yeah, TerryPatten.
Oh, it's too fast.
I'm sorry. So Terry, Terry,
Yeah.
Patton, Patten.
Okay. Well, that's almost what I had. Okay, thank you. I'll check that out.
Yeah, and I'll put some links in the chat if anybody wants to go back and get some of the stuff that would have been on a slide if I had done a slide. But there's lots of stuff there that's available to follow through on any of this material if you're interested.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Okay, yeah. So there's two things that I'm curious to hear your perspective on. One is what you talked about, the idea of updating New Thought, and more generally to the idea of updating doctrinal establishment institutions, established doctrinal institutions, whether when the updating requires revisions to the foundations upon which that institution was originally founded, it in some ways threatens the very stability of the institution, because a lot of the people who are old timers or who just found comfort in this previous belief system will see any update to it as an incredible threat to the entire structure of what the institution is. So, which is usually why institutions can't be updated once they have developed a faith-based doctrine, and they don't have and when they haven't originally had integrated into them from the start a method of updating. So they just become sort of frozen in time. That's what all fundamentalist religion is really an artifact of. So, so my question is, in relation to the New Thought movement, it seems that there was some element of faith involved in accepting those original premises. They may be said to be scientific, as the person who promotes them claims that they are, but they're not really. They're not really subjected to like testing and falsification. And it doesn't. And I'm not. And unless you are aware of this, I kind of doubt that that the person who created, or the movement that created them, also created an update mechanism that was integral to them for how to move forward with them. So if that's so, then is the hope that you were sharing about updating New Thought, is it sort of a pie in the sky hope, or do you see there being like real like how is it going to overcome this challenge of updating things which already have established doctrines that I was discussing?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it can be quite heart-wrenching to work with this, because I care about the movement and I don't want to see it go away, but at the same time, from an integral perspective, from a second tier perspective, of both. And so on a spectrum, I guess you could say, something has been alive and living, and in its heyday it was the latest, greatest, brand new thing back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. It was part of the transcendentalist movement of New England. Authors such as Ralph Waldo Emerson and all of those authors like Walt Whitman and Henry David Longfellow, whatever his name is, sorry for the name, Louisa May Alcott, all of these writers of that period and that location in New England and the United States at that time period were called the Transcendentalists. It was a movement. And that was the latest, greatest thing at that time. So, and it was upsetting something that had come prior, just like that's the way things work, something is leaving and something new is coming. So for me, in terms of the New Thought movement, I guess in a way it is a sort of both and, that maybe my place is to sort of help hospice that which is leaving, and midwife that which is coming, that which is emerging. And it's in a place right now of liminality. It's in betwixt and between. It's not there, it's not there. It's in between those two, which is which I think in general our world, to a great extent, is in a transition phase. And the old systems are dying, but the new systems haven't quite emerged yet. So we're really in this very uncomfortable place, kind of like being in the chrysalis between the caterpillar and the butterfly. You're just really almost consuming yourself. You're dying, and yet you don't know, because the caterpillar has no vision, no inkling of what the butterfly is. Has no idea. that it's about to turn into a butterfly. At least we think anyway. But they did have imaginal cells that knew how to become the butterfly. So I guess from my perspective, there is something innate, something that's beyond ourselves, something from the divine in us that knows how to evolve. And if left to its own devices without too much, resistance or interference, we will evolve, which means we probably will, certain things will need to die or leave, go away, to make space for something that's coming, that's emerging. But during that middle phase, during that liminal phase, it's not nothing, and there's great wisdom, great potential for wisdom and opportunities for growth even during this liminal phase. So that's probably what I would be encouraging, is to tap into that unknown, that uncomfortableness, that confusion, chaos. It's a transition, it's a transformation, and you can't get there without going through it. The only way out is through, so you actually have to, and there's wonderful poetry out there. And that's why I think where the arts can come into a great play is to help us to deal with this transition, is to tap into the arts, into poetry and literature and movies and films and music and songs and dance and all the things that help us to be alive, to be open and to interrelate with each other during this time, to have empathy and compassion for ourselves and for each other as we're going through this time. My heart goes out to the young people who are just graduating high school and college right now. It's very difficult for them to, and I don't even think that, well, some of them are aware, but a lot of them don't even realize potentially, what their lives are going to be like. So I don't know if that helps to answer your question, Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, you said that it's challenging and that it's uncertain. So, yeah.
It is, yeah. And to a certain extent, when I say update, and there are others in the movement that are trying to do this, and in particular, my friend, Dr. Jim Lockhart, he's has a blog post that he calls the New Thought Evolutionary. And he also is trying to help the movement to evolve through this period of time. And he's put forth some a theology or a philosophy of his own. And but the powers that be, I guess you could say, within the established system of in particular right now, I'm referring to the Centers for Spiritual Living, they're not necessarily on board with what he's trying to do. So yeah.
Thank you.
We got a couple of people, Barbara and Gail have got their hands up. I had some thoughts on your direct question, Jonathan. I can hold those until Barbara and Gail are done, if you don't mind.
You're muted.
Yeah, I had thoughts on the direct question too. So
Go ahead. I've taken some notes, so I'm not gonna forget it. So go ahead, Barbara, and then Gail, you're up after that.
Several mainstream Protestant churches 50, 60 years ago were multi-mimetic, particularly in Middle America, that the congregations were blue-orange with incipient green coming into them. And, by doctrine, they thought the blue was important, but by their nature of being who they were, they also were into some orange questioning. And it was perfectly okay for a Sunday school kid to say, what the heck, you know?
Mhm.
Explain how that works, and those sorts of things. And you kept hearing incipient green, one of which was ecumenical stuff that went on in the churches. And so, you know, instead of having, you know, 5 different church services on Thanksgiving, there might only be 2, right? And the Lutherans and the Methodists and you know, would come together and do a single church service. So all of that, you know, felt to me to be sort of the green coming in of there's room, and that got stronger and stronger. So we ended up, you know, allowing women to be ordained, something that had been discouraged
Right.
in the past. You know, we ended that was an Orange thing, right? You know, we ended up performing gay marriages, a very green thing, right? And then there became a real problem because people need to go through the stages, right? And so people had come into the church with a blue need, right? To do a lot of that certainty and a lot of you know, God's will and all of that at a blue level. And then here's all these orange and green folks running around with sort of going, oh well, you know, I know it says there thus and so, but in modern terms, we understand that that was just a metaphor, and that doesn't work
Yeah.
very well for blue,
Yeah.
right? And so new people coming in didn't get that, you know, younger folks coming in. I think Jordan Peterson really talks a lot about that, and I think he makes a good point that people coming in didn't get that comfort that people in the blue stage need of some sort of universal truth. And we were just telling them to no, you know, you got to get beyond all of this. And it's like, what? And
Right.
so yeah, and so we were sort of missed it. And so a lot of sects have split off, and they have
Right.
a blue group that will not have transsexuals in it. And I don't care whether you think they're God's children or not. I don't want my kids exposed to that, right? And a green group that is, we're all God's children, you know. And what do you mean you reject God's children? And then we have this weird orange megachurch, right? So there's one in Houston that moved into the old one of the old stadiums, and they fill it, but it's all a prosperity gospel, right?
Right.
And that has
Yeah.
become popular, but it doesn't have a lot of meaning behind it, right? So again, when you're at that blue need for meaning in an absolute sense versus meaning the way all of us here talk about it, it doesn't draw people in, right? And so that, you know, it just, even when they tried so hard to update and to become relevant, they ended up being less relevant to that portion of the population that still needs some blue certainty.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I think that's the answer, John, that they've tried, but it's very hard because at blue, your spiritual needs are just different than they are at green.
Well,
And
yes, and I'll also keep in mind that it isn't until second tier that we develop the capacity to see 2 or more seemingly opposite things can all be true at the same time. So, you know, so you're not going to get any of that until second tier. And then second tier, I guess this kind of theology that I'm proposing or, you know, putting forward a little whatever, the way it was speaking, it is not, it is going to include within it the notion that the conflict or disagreements or whatever is not a bad thing, you know.
But and that is so hard for folks at Blue who especially
Mhm.
as much turmoil as there is in society, right?
Mhm.
It's okay for orange and yellow to say, well, chaos is what it is. You,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
need to believe in reality. But that is so painful spiritually to a lot of folks that are still at Blue.
Yeah, it's going to be painful.
So,
I think that's
yeah.
the other thing is to recognize that, of course, you may not be able to recognize it as you're going through it, but from a certain perspective, you can recognize that pain is our teacher, a kind of thing. That again, the analogy of the butterfly to the caterpillar, or the caterpillar to the butterfly, you can't get there except by dying and coming out, the other side, it's a transformation. And so a
And I go to
transformation
church
means
because I don't want to be transformed.
right, you
I
don't want to
want some
be right.
stability in my life,
So
Margie.
they're going to
You
resist
guys
it,
just stop it. Yeah.
But I do think that from the broadest sense, life wants to live, and
Right.
it will continue to evolve regardless. Species will die or will come and go or whatever. Things will, and eventually in our solar system, the sun will burn out and the solar system will be no more. Who knows? But you're talking way, way, way big picture. Also, the whole notion of multi-universes and multi-personalities, everything. Basically, the theory of everything from Ken Wilber is kind of like the notion of everything everywhere happening all at once, ad infinitum. That there is no beginning, there is no ending, and yet everything is happening in the present moment. So it's really it is a complex a willingness and a desire, a curiosity to stretch, from those very basic principles. I don't necessarily think that the principles, there's certain things I feel as principles are true at their core, at their heart, but it's our understanding of them changes, evolves as we get more information. For example, with the quantum physics things, and so that kind of really displaced the Newtonian physics or the classical physics. So, but both exist at the same time. They're both in play. So, but I did want to share a thing, one more thing before we close, but that I wanted to share that I wrote. This is my own words, and in regards to conflict. So here we go. Conflict is an inconvenient truth, a necessary friction for conscious evolution. It is partially the grist for the mill, the raw material of alchemy. It is partially what happens when two or more are gathered and dare to bring their whole imperfect selves into relation. Conflict is the necessary dissonance that lets us taste consonance. It is partially the mirror where spiritual beings living human experiences come face to face with their shared fragility. People who need people. Oy vey, woe is me. Conflict arises when I am attached to outcome, when I forget that my soul's longing to know itself must pass through the bottleneck of human limitation. Conflict flares when wanting hardens into need, when expectation replaces preference, when the prayer for serenity is left unsaid. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Conflict blooms when I put conditions on my intention to love. It festers when I resist what is. And yet, would I truly want a world without conflict? Probably not. Conflict is the passion inside compassion. It is beautiful, but not always pretty. It evolves as we evolve, messy and magnificent. I am here now to see the beauty within the beast, to bow before the rawness and say, all is well. This is what it means to be grounded to that which is not grounded, to hold on to that which holds on to nothing. Not everything is simple. Most things indeed are gorgeously complex. Some things cannot be fixed or remedied. Some wounds are not meant to close. Conflict is not a problem to be solved, but an experience to be lived. It is the nudge that stirs the soul from complacency, the dance partner that invites co-creation with Source. It is the cosmic friction that births the sacred third, something brand new, something that has never existed before. Miracle of miracles, this is how we space is born. These reflections are not certainties, but glimpses, true and partial. They are not polished doctrines, but offerings shaped by experience, lessons repeated, humbled by resistance until surrender softens the ego's grasp. I do not share them as fixed answers, but as footprints along a spiraling path of remembering, where conflict itself becomes not an enemy, but a threshold. May we bless what is becoming, what is not yet ready. May we bless our own longing as part of this sacred labor. We sense the not yet born receives this blessing, not as a push, but as a warm, steady pulse of welcome. All is well, all is whole, all continues to evolve unto infinity. Blessed be.
Thank you, Marjorie. Gail, go ahead.
Thank you. I guess what Barbara wanted to say is why not leaving the movement, the New Thought movement, the way it is? Because some people need it the way it is. Or how do we know that this movement specifically needs to evolve, and that other movements should stay the way they are? Maybe that's what Barbara wanted to say. I don't know, but I thought about that. And regarding my own question, I was wondering, do you want to publish this New Thought update on your website or on their website, or
It's a good question.
as a book, or how do you intend to share it? Is it just for yourself and your friends, or do you want the movement to know about it and think about it and talk about it, or it's just for yourself and your friends? And
that's a good question. It started out as my own personal seeking and my own personal journey. However, I am feeling called, so to speak, or pulled into the direction of at least sharing it on. I have a Substack that I could put it onto. I could put it forward to some of the leaders in the New Thought movement, see how they respond. So I do plan to put it somewhere out there in the world so that it's out there. But I think with a lot of humility, because this is all something that is very much in transition, and I'm coming from a certain perspective, and I'm hoping to be able to listen, to that still small voice inside myself and to the collective as to what it is that's emerging. So maybe what I have to offer might be a part of something else, in combination or in interrelationality with other people that are out there trying to do similar things. So we'll see what happens, but thank you for asking. And yeah, part of it, part of my own desire to see the New Thought movement survive and thrive is because I love it, and those are my peeps, and I've become attached,
So in a way,
So-
you know that it has to evolve because it's dying. If
yeah,
if it was meant to stay the same with its current target, I would say, there would be no need to update it because it would serve already its purpose. But since it's decaying and people are not attending the events, or like, I don't know how it's how it works, but you said also the memberships are declining and all that. So maybe that's an indication, a sign that it would need to be updated and not stay the same.
right. Yeah, I appreciate that question. I think you're right that there is a possibility there that the movement just does need to fade into antiquity, as they say. I don't know, but I think as a person who's involved in it and that cares a lot about it, and just looking at in comparison to my own life. So today's my 76th birthday,
Happy
and
birthday.
yeah. So, I'm in the process of kind of reviewing my own life, and putting forward to my family, what my own will and testament, and my own how I wish to be remembered, and my own legacy and that sort of thing, and my own wish for the future. So I think in a way it's kind of like a way to honor the past by helping it to continue on in some way, shape, or form into whatever is going to emerge from the future. So it's just kind of putting my little will, or my own desire and longing for the good, true, and beautiful to continue in some way, shape, or form, and this is just my little contribution to that effort. Yeah.
Yeah. You feel the call for it. So
Yeah, there's something there that's kind of pulling me as a vision, so to speak, or whatever.
thank
Please put it
you.
out there, Marjorie. Please put it out there.
Oh, thank you, Barbara. I will do something. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Gail. Real quickly, Jonathan, you'd asked the question about institutions or organizations and how to kind of build in this adaptive mechanism. I think you're asking a really profound question. I guess, and these are just my observations and the sense of how I have it. It's, I've often viewed the fact that, institutions, call them intersubjective entities, to use a Harari term, whatever term you want to use, in terms of manifesting in a physical way a particular worldview. It's institutions that really do the heavy lifting. It's that communal, collaborative effort that when people come together in a sense, they're trying to manifest their beliefs,
Right.
and I'm, that can be defined in a million different ways. And I think that I think that the work of gestating, if you will, the those beliefs, those philosophies, creating the vision that those institutions eventually manifest, that really occurs at an individual level and then probably at a much more informal, collaborative level.
Yeah.
But I think that the difficulty that you speak to is where I don't know that mechanisms to change institutions really, I'm doubtful whether you can do that because those institutions are generally created to manifest a belief system, manifest a vision, manifest whatever it is, and they're there to service those visions. And if you can only change those visions so much, and they go away, they're no longer able to be manifested. And as long as you've got people who have those visions, want to see those visions manifested, those institutions will continue to exist. I've often looked at the back and forth between the I, me, and the we, us that's inherent in spiral dynamics. I've always kind of seen one way of imagining in my mind what the left side does is it gestates those visions, and that the right side is, once those visions have been gestated and birthed, they manifest in the material plane those visions, and which brings up the question to me is, I don't think there's an awful lot of green institutions out there. There's a massive amount of blue and orange institutions out there, and I don't know if there's any yellow institutions out there. So I wonder how much, is this integral worldview still in a gestation period, awaiting the birth so that it can then be manifested by some future institutions. I don't know. It's just
when you say institutions, it may not be institutions. It might be some other that we can't even, because it's so many questions to consider when you consider that we are facing climate change, and we just don't even know. So perhaps what is longing to be remembered, or to remain intact enough to be at some point remembered from the future, is that if certain things happen the way that it's predicted to happen, potentially with climate change, we may be starting over with a completely, almost like a brand new, going back to beige, and it's like survival instinct, and new institutions and systems will have to evolve to accommodate those conditions and so forth. So who knows? We just don't know. So I think it's living within that completely unknown, uncertain, as I was speaking about before, and then in the poem that I wrote, just being okay with the uncertainty, kind of thing. So, Daryl, did you have a question?
Oh,
good
yes.
to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Interesting discussion, Marjorie, and happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, lots of things going through my mind. Yeah, one is, this is very similar. I think Paul mentioned it. The gentleman who wrote the book, his name escapes me, but I was wondering, did he have any relationship connection with the Theosophical Society? Are you aware?
Oh yeah, he was the founder of it.
Oh.
Manly P. Hall was the founder of the Theosophical Society in Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles, okay, that's what I was wondering, because
Yep.
we have a Theosophical library here in Ojai, which is really one of the reasons why I actually end up moving to Ojai. I used to go to the Theosophical library to check out books by everybody, all the esoteric, let's say, kinds of folks.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've heard of the name Sue Mills, but that there's several different authors come through, and they have speakers and whatnot come throughout. So I'm very connected, if you will, to the
Yeah,
theosophical
wonderful.
way of thinking. So I appreciate
Yeah.
that. And I recently attended a Science of Mind service down in LA for a friend of mine who's being
Okay.
installed as a minister at one of their churches, I guess they have.
Wonderful.
So I'm very interested in that, what it tells me and informs me, there is not, let's say, if you go to, let's say the last 10 years or so, if you would have attended Sparta Dynamics integral training, you would have a mix of people in the room. And a lot of times the mix of people would be anywhere from a third of them being new age thought leaders or, folks who appreciate that kind of thinking. People who practice, neural linguistic programming, from which was, by the way, what Natasha did before she came into Sparta. I mean, she was an NLP expert practitioner. But I met a lot of them there, and a good third of the room was people interested in marketing, from consulting and whatnot. And then you had a third of the folks who were just knowledge-seeking theorists of a kind. I attended a session with Don and Jane Houston, and so I appreciate the spiritual aspects of Sparta Dynamics. But I would tell you
Yeah.
that your thought patterns and the way you view the world, let me put it like that, from what I could understand, there's a very spiritual
Mhm.
nature to it. And
Yeah.
and that is, while I believe Sparta Dynamics contains that, it is not the mainstay of what people involving
Mhm.
themselves in Sparta Dynamics are about.
I know.
However, however, the framework is broad enough and big enough and dense enough to contain that. And I think if you're going to have solutions going forward in the world, whatever your religious, spiritual nature, practice, discipline, whatever you want to call it, there's an aspect of large scale change that has to acknowledge that. It reminds me of the movie, I don't know if it was called Contact. Uh,
Yeah.
Jodie Foster was in it.
Yes.
So
Contact.
huh?
It
Was
was
that,
contact, yeah.
yeah. It reminds me of that movie when the character, the man said to her, she was a scientist and a real skeptic, if not atheist, and he was a minister, and they became connected, and what was so fascinating about that was, like, he said to her somewhere in the movie, how is it, smart as you are, something like that, that like eight tenths, 80% of the world believe in something, whereas the minimum of
Mhm.
folks don't believe in anything, and I just thought it was fascinating that the way he put that, but I wanted to also, just as thoughts hit my mind, I wanted to also return to your point about the 12 principles. And I went through a presentation and I found the 12 principles, after you mentioned it. And it's interesting because those 12 principles, which for Graves are called postulates, right, which really are the foundation of the whole spiral dynamics thing, because one presumes, in order for the framework to have legitimacy, that it has to simultaneously hit all 12 postulates. All 12 of them have to be
Mhm.
principle in which you adhere to as you think through things spiral dynamically, so to speak. But I just thought it was fascinating because I agree absolutely that there are spiritual aspects to solutions. And one of the big things, and Said does this in his book really well, Said returns everybody to the fact that what Don was more a proponent of than anything, was large scale change.
Right.
To Paul's point about, well, these institutions are sometimes just very difficult to change. You look at what like it or hate it, you look at the way President Trump operates, and his modus operandi is to break institutions. Now, one can question why he's trying to break it. It is maybe nefarious and maybe this, that, or the other. But the point is the method that he's undertaken, uh, in essence, from a change agent's point of view. forget the content for a minute, but from a change agent's point of view, the method he's undertaken to attack institutions is effective, like it or lump it. I mean, they are being stressed and challenged. Now, you could stress and challenge the institutions for good, you could stress and challenge the institution for bad, whatever your definitions there. But from the clinical practitioner's point of view, Don and Chris Cohen, for that matter, his co-author, they really brought to the forefront the essential elements of Gravesian's methods, particularly when it comes to addressing Paul's point that he elucidated based on the comments. I guess they were from Jonathan, question of some sort, where the issue is how would an institution change? How does an institution change? When does it change? How does it know to change? Does it have the capability to even change? Those 12 postulates give you the fundamental basis of the going in presumptions on if there even is a capacity for this, that, or the other large scale organization change. And I think it is about institutions, in my opinion, and that is really the reason Don went to South Africa. I think was because it presented a microcosm of large scale possibilities with very, very serious intractable problems. And he proved out for himself anyway, and the results kind of showed it that yes, the spirodynamics is a framework, and then later on the integral being added to it really is a mechanism, a method in which large scale change can be constructively facilitated to change.
Yeah, that's wonderful observation there, Daryl. Yeah, I think, in regards to the Gravesian principles or any of the other principles that I was mentioning, the kind of postulates that are put out there as a statement of fact or a statement of belief, a lot of it is affected by the people who are participating in that, so that you can look at any sacred text like the Bible, for example, and you can read it as a fundamentalist and take it word for word, literal translation, that each word is actual factual truth, and that's it. There's no question. So that's a fundamentalist perspective on it. Or you can also look at it and have the same words, the same text, and look at the stories or the words as metaphor and symbols and symbolic and parables,
allegories,
allegories and so forth. So it's the way you look at it. So I think it was Wayne Dyer that said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
That's well put. Yeah.
So change itself is dependent partially on
the observer,
who's on the observer, on who's looking, and their perspective on it. And then the other thing I was going to say, I don't know if it just kind of left my brain. But yeah, I guess that's basically it, is to hold it, sort of hold it lightly. So it does require sort of second tier capacity to hold two or more, or to hold something within a both and way, and if you're below that capacity, then you're going to be struggling, and so but I also wanted to mention, because we're about to wind up here, that with all of these things, even at second tier, or even with the most benign perspective on all of this, is that there's always going to be the shadow side to anything, and hopefully from a second tier, to be able to see that shadow as not an enemy, but as an aspect of the one, or the totality, or the wholeness of all potential and possibility. So if you say that everything is one and everything is part of the total picture of the wholeness of it, which by in terms of infinite, it's never complete, because there was no beginning and no ending. So there is no ending point, And so I guess from all of these things is to be able to to look at something like you mentioned Trump. So he, even if he's coming, even looking at it from the most benign perspective, of him, there's potential for harm there as well as potential for good. I'm having difficulty finding any potential for good right now with Trump, but there, I'm sure it's there somewhere. But that's just me, because and just as a side, if I'm not mistaken, I could be mistaken, but I believe that Don Beck was a Trump supporter, is from
That's
what I
right.
understand. Yeah,
That's right.
and he was seeing it from a way big picture,
Mhm.
kind of thing. So I'm too bad he's no longer with us to hear what he might have to say today about all of this. But
Mhm. No, you're right. Yeah,
yeah,
Yes,
we
definitely.
would discuss that.
yeah.
It always
Jonathan,
befuddles. Yeah.
did you still have your hand up, Jonathan?
Yeah, I put it up again. Do you
Oh,
want to call on
okay.
me?
Yes,
Or
please.
okay. Yeah, I was really struck by something you read in the last in what you called the poem about conflict, and I think a lot, what you said is really profound. And it's also, there's a line there that I find myself grappling with. You said that if the world could be without conflict, I think that I would still want there to be conflict.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Almost as if to say that conflict, that there's no ideal outside of conflict. And so this may have, as I was thinking about it, so my initial question was that, like, well, there's a dialectical process of growth, as kind of, that you didn't use that term in your thing, but where things see contrast and then they come to growth through that. And the way I generally used to see conflict is when one of the positions in that dialectic is being overly egocentric and unwilling to be receptive to the other position in the dialectic, and is just going to be adding friction into the dialectical process of growth, which is unconstructive. And therefore conflict in in that unconstructive way is what I thought of as the term conflict, whereas just being aware of there being something outside of the current boundaries that I'm in, it's not really conflict. That's more like dialectical growth and self-transcendence. So if my original question was thinking like, well, if I could have a world in which everyone and everything is able to embrace dialectical growth without egocentric resistance to change, or and with all of the capacity to fully engage in the other perspective and to integrate it appropriately to themselves and to bring their own perspective appropriately to the other person, wouldn't that be so much more of an ideal world rather than a world where there's so much egocentricity blocking this
Right.
dialectical process from evolving? That's the frustration of living. So but then I remember this kind of goes back to the discussion we had like a year and a half or 2 years ago on Facebook as to whether like destruction is inherently necessary and good, like destructiveness, like just destructiveness for its own sake, not destructiveness for the purpose of construction, but just like for its own sake, whether there's a value to it. And I think you were taking like, I guess I would have to call it like a non-dualistic perspective, where you have to sort of step outside of identifying what's good and bad, the way I understood what you were saying, and to say that we can't really identify what's good and bad. We just have to accept all that is, and including the destructiveness, even if it seems pointless. We can't really judge it and say that we'd rather have a world where there isn't destructiveness, pointless destructiveness. And so I was having a hard time with that based because I have more of like this the tendency, I guess, to want to see things through rationality, and rationality says, well, the start of rationality is identify what the values are, and then you try to figure out the way to achieve those values. So that wouldn't really fit in with that. But I was just thinking about that previous conversation we
Yeah.
had on Facebook when I was
Oh, yeah.
processing
Thank
the
you. I remember
question.
that. I
Yeah.
remember that. Yeah. Yeah, so does it change your question any if we change the word from destruction to deconstruction? Does that change anything?
Well, I mean, if you're trying to change, if you're trying to step into sort of my frame of thinking, which was like, there's a better way to, there's like a more ideal world and a less ideal world, then I think that that premise means that logically we're sort of forced into the idea that things which are destructive and have um, no purpose for being constructive, destruction just for its own sake, that would be not good. But so I thought that the only way I could sort of make sense of your perspective was to step outside of the frame of thinking of that there's a more ideal world and a less ideal world that we can imagine.
Yeah.
But like, because
Yeah, that is a good,
deconstruction, because we had been, when we had been talking about that, like we explicitly spoke about destruction, that's just purely destructive, that's destruction for its own sake, just like just like a destructive force that's completely egocentric and not at all for the purpose of constructiveness. And maybe there could be no constructiveness that comes out of it. It just destroys things. Let's say let's say there was an asteroid that hit Earth and just destroyed all life on Earth. Like, that would just be the end. It would there as far let's you could say, oh, maybe there would be some new life that would come in a billion years from this destroyed Earth. But let's say we don't know that, like, or let's say that's not true. But I thought you had been positing that there's still just an inherent value in destructiveness itself. Or I don't know, it doesn't really make sense to use the word value, but an inherent acceptance.
Right, yeah. I guess some of that might be coming from, well, two things. The way that I understand evolution works, and in terms of the spiral or integral theory, that everyone comes in as a newborn starting at square one. And so you're always going to have people at all different kinds of, in any given society at any different time, you're going to have people at all different levels of development all the time, and even within ourselves, we can kind of go up and down. So, and so in terms of deconstructing or destruction, I don't know. I just think it's the way evolution works naturally, even within the nature, the world of nature,
Well,
Yeah.
you guys started off by, and I just wanted to weigh in because I think you started off discussing conflict,
Yeah.
and the conversation evolved to destruction. And there's a difference because the concept of conflict is useful in the design, co-design, redesign, whatever you want to call it, of an organization, institution, or a person. I mean, conflict is a very real part of reality all of the time. Yeah, I mean, people walk into a room conflicted by themselves. Should I be here or should I have stayed home with my sick child? So people in and of themselves, no input from the external world, are conflicted. So when you get 20 people in the room, you just are probably going to have some level of conflict inherent in the conversation. It may not have anything to do with intention or ego. The mere fact that I've showed up, he showed up, you showed up, I got some issues I'm thinking about right now, so I'm not fully present, which introduces yet another level of conflict. So my point is that there is for sure in the realm of decision making a very useful aspect of conflict when it's on the table. It's when you go into subterfuge, vicious gossip, backbiting, and those kinds of things. But conflict in and of itself, I think, is an inherently useful thing to have a dialogue, because my interests aren't necessarily 100% always aligned with your interests or her interests or his interests. And oh, by the way, how we communicate our interests is another source of conflict. So the decision-making process itself, people approach it with various rationales on why they want to be there, what it is to contribute. I may be more talkative than you. You may be an introvert. She may be an extrovert, and so I'm pointing out that not to conflate conflict with destruction.
Yeah.
Conflict, I believe, is a useful thing in terms of change management and dialogue about change management. Just wanted to add that. I
Yeah,
saw how
thank
you guys
you.
evolved the conversation, went from conflict to destruction. I'm like, ooh.
Yeah, right. Yeah, go down a little rabbit hole there.
Well, to add to that, Daryl, it's even more than that. I mean, destruction is a neutral thing. I'm gonna make a statement. Over the next 5 years, the average global temperature on planet Earth goes to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Is that inherently, when viewed in a broad universal sense, is that a bad thing? No, it's just a thing. Now, what are the implications of that? Well, one of the implications is that humanity will be destroyed.
Yeah.
You know, humanity cannot maintain itself in a consistent 24/7 environment of 110 degrees. It's just can't do it. So destruction, you can perceive it positively or negatively, but the concept itself is also like conflict. It's just inherent in reality.
Like
Yeah.
Schumpeter. It was an economist, Schumpeter, called it creative destruction.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Neil, you got your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I don't know if Marjorie, you will leave soon, but I wanted to give my little piece around the destruction thing and the good and the bad and that. And Paul actually said what I wanted to say. So I won't repeat what he says, but I'll try not repeat. But basically, we can't really know necessarily, like, there is no good or bad, or destruction is not necessarily good or bad. It depends on the perspective you take, and you can take the perspective of the one person. You can take the perspective of an insect. You can take the perspective of the earth. You can take the perspective of the universe. You can take so many different perspectives, and depending on the perspective, you will find that it can be good, it can be bad, and it's not even easy to figure out for oneself whether it's good or bad, because we don't know everything, even about ourselves, about our path, about what we are here to experience, and all that. So even at the level of our soul, there is a perspective. So I think the way we can figure out whether something is good or bad for us, or for a specific sample of people, or like, you have to have some boundaries to say, okay, it's good. Is it good or bad for this specific set of people, or these specific perceptions? Because if you don't, well, it's infinite. So there is, you can't talk about good or bad in an infinite thing. It's non-dual.
Yeah.
So there is absolutely
Right.
no way to be able to judge that. But even if we take a sample, a specific sample of people, is it, or it can be me, it can be my family, or whatever, or my country, or whatever. It may be good to connect to intuition, to a higher part of our being that connects at the soul level to other souls. Because it has a larger perspective than we have as a little ego. And of course, we can use the rationality, the mind, and all that, because it serves a purpose, and it can be very useful. But I think it's good to also connect to the higher perspective to make a judgment that is more that is larger, that is more that is higher, that takes more perspective, like that sees more of the thing, of the perspective, like that of the situation.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. I think, you know, I remember, you know, working with Terry Patton, and he was saying that from that second tier perspective, you can hold all perspectives as being true and partial, and at the same time, you can zero in on a particular thing in this 3D realm that you deem to be wrong, or that needs correction, or that needs to change. And so, for example, in the politics, you know, you can, you're holding it from a higher place, but at the same time, you're coming back into this 3D manifest world, and you're using your ability to manifest and to make something happen in the 3D reality. And so you can choose to either fight against something or for something. At the same time, you're holding the notion that there is this higher understanding, that there is no particular judgment about good and bad. But at the same time, you're able to because I think there's I guess a certain philosophical perspective that I hold lightly, is that from the past, present, and future, it is here in the present, in this manifest 3D world, some people call it the middle world, that you know, you come in from the invisible, you're here now in the present, in the 3D reality, and you will return back to the invisible again. But it's basically, you know, you're calling on the ancestors, and you're looking to the heirs, because that understanding, or that perspective on reality coming from the invisible, is dependent on what happens in this present moment in the physical manifest world, in order to make change happen in a physical reality. But it's not to say that necessarily things don't happen in the invisible realm as well to help make change. But I don't know. I mean, that's kind of going on off into a different aspect. But I don't know. My voice is starting to go, and I was supposed to leave at 12. So I kind of like to wrap up, but I am willing to stay if anybody wants to stay longer. And I really, really appreciate everybody's questions and the comments and the discussion that we've had. It's been really wonderful. You've made my my first experience at this a positive one. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Marjorie. I am going to stop the recording.
Okay, thank you.